What's going on, guys? So today I want to do something a little bit different. We haven't done this before, but I want to talk through. Some of you might have seen the YouTube video that the makers of the game dropped, talking about the upcoming nerfs and buffs, basically balance changes that the game is going to see here coming up next week, I believe. I think it was the 13th, if I'm not mistaken, is when it drops. But this video, I definitely want to look at some cards I think could potentially get hit. Now, these aren't, these are just speculation. I have no information from the company in any way. This is just my personal, this is what I would expect. Some of these are just things that would be on my wish list, like I wish they'd buff some of these cards, or I wish they'd nerf some of these cards, but doesn't mean they will. Obviously, this is me just speculating on some of the nerfs, and there's just so many cards that really could be buffed. It's just, I'm just going to provide a few that I think would be kind of neat to see, and give you some, I might even give you some changes here on what I would prefer to see in the change to the card. So I'm going to start off with the nerfs. So I'm going to just go to some of the cards that I have a little list here next to me. I'm just going to start pulling up cards. You guys can check them out as we go. I'm still filtered by type here. We're going to look at the big dog right out the gate. Probably the first card I would expect to see on the nerf list, Planet X. And obviously this card has been just a powerhouse in the meta, really kind of overtaking. If this card isn't in your deck, you basically have to have some type of Bobbit Worm shell to be able to combat this deck. There's some other brews, like there's some taxing decks, inflation type decks that can put this card on its knees too. But overall, this card is just running amok through the meta, I think. This is like I said, my personal belief. So looking at this card, it says if your deck has 9 or fewer space cards, your space cards, wherever they are, gain plus 15, and then repeat if you have exactly 4. So most of the people out there are running this with Black Hole. We're seeing a lot of Sidonias. There's a couple others that are running around with this card. I'm blanking off the top of my head, but obviously they're rocking 4 ofs, so they're getting a nice plus 30 buff permanently on all their cards. So what I would expect to see is they change this plus 15 down to plus 10. And then I would also like to see a reduction in base power. I'm thinking somewhere around 49. That way, and doing this, you could even choose to reduce the cost of the card a little bit, maybe drop it down to an 8 or a 7 costed card. But the base power reduction is going to help us get around Dark Web buffing it as well. Since it's already getting such good buff on its own, I just feel like knocking this base power under the Dark Web threshold, just to really put this card down a peg, I think would really help a lot. I don't know if that's, obviously I don't know what they're going to do, but at minimum, I think they need to take the plus 15 down to plus 10. So at best case, if you have exactly 4, you're going to get a plus 20 permanent buff. That's what I would do. Jumping to the next card on the list, I just kind of mentioned it as a combat card. I know we hate to see cards like this that are basically only ways to counter the meta. This card specifically is right now the counter to Dark Web and these big decks like Planet X decks. So, but if those cards were taken down a peg, we might not need Bobbit Worm as much, right? So we could reduce this card, I think, from a minus 30 until played to a minus 25 until played. So I would say knock this down just a little bit. I don't think it's too broken. I just think we see it a lot right now because there's not a lot of other options to combat this meta. So that could be why we just see Bobbit Worm decks running around so frequently right now. But might not need changed if you did knock down some of these other decks a peg. You might not see as many Bobbit Worm decks running around, so maybe it wouldn't need a nerf after all. One of the big ones, Dark Web. I think we are definitely going to see a nerf to Dark Web. Again, I'm speculating. I do not know for sure, but I would assume that we do see a nerf to this card. My change would be taking it from plus 5 permanently to plus 2 And then what I would do is I would remove the maximum 5 cap. So this would allow for a little decks that need certain cards over 50. They aren't getting punished. So there's a lot of decks that there's core cards to the deck that require cards over 50, but people are hesitant to put them in decks right now because of the dark web meta, right? So if I have to drop in 4 or 5 core cards that I need for my specific brew, but now I'm getting punished because dark web decks are running around gaining plus 25 just because I need a few of these cards to make my normal brew function properly. So that, I think, is what's hindering. So if you killed the maximum cap and then reduced to the plus 2, you could put your normal, 3, 4, 5 cards over 50, and you're not going to get punished as badly, right? They're only going to get that plus 8, plus 10 permanent versus this plus 25 that they're getting right now for, only having 5 cards in my deck that are over 50. So I think that would be what I would do to nerf this card, but it does make the maximum potential greater. So for those decks that are just trying to run these big meaty cards like Planet X, they would basically, they'd be hurting themselves against another dark web deck as they are, the maximum potential is even greater. So I think it would just help these smaller decks that aren't playing as many big cards be able to stack up against dark web a little better. So that's what I would do with that card. Switching gears from the crazy over the top cards, I'm going to look at a card that I think is just too good for its current rarity. I think epic cards should not be as good as most legendary cards, and this card to me should be a legendary. Either should be a legendary card or should be nerfed down to an epic quality card, right? So there's tons of legendary cards that are out there that I think this card overtakes. So for that reason alone, I think either it needs to be a legendary card or it needs to be nerfed. So what I would do is keep it at an epic, and I would reduce the buff from plus 70 to plus 55. So I think that would be reasonable for the energy spent. I think the plus 140 is a little much that you're going to get for this card, but that's just, again, my opinion. Another card we've been seeing a lot, it's a newer card. We've been seeing it quite frequently, and again, same thing as Lovers. I think it's too good for its rarity. I think we should... I think this card needs to be reduced on its buff again. I think closer to plus 30 would be more reasonable. I think plus 38 is just a little too much for what we get here. I think if it was a legendary card, maybe you go up to plus 35, but I still think plus 38 is a little too good. So I have been seeing a lot of Apple Tree getting thrown into a lot of decks, and I think it's could use a little take down a peg a little bit here. Another card I'm going to target is a card in the Greek deck. So I think Greek is a really strong deck. It's not played a ton. At least I haven't been seeing it a ton, but when I do play against it, it's really strong. And I think a card like this, again, kind of similar to the Lovers, it's a core card in the deck, but it's an epic card, and you're getting a lot for just an epic card here. The potential for a plus 24 until played buff. That seems really strong for an epic card. So I would look to reduce this card from this plus 12 until played down to plus 10 on both of the items. So that would only give you potential for plus 20 on your Greek mythology cards instead of plus 24. Not a huge nerf, but just bringing it down a peg, I think, could hurt the Greek decks just a little bit. Maybe bring them down just a little notch. Nothing crazy, but I think it could help. Next up, I'm looking at another epic card I think is a little overpowered. And just the cephalopods in general, to me, are a little overpowered. And most of them are epic cards that are in that shell. So I don't think you need to hurt all of them. I think just hurting one a decent amount would basically knock the whole system down a peg. So I would look for a Flapjack or possibly Colossal Squid nerf. For this video, I'm going to say Flapjack would be my choice, and I would take it from a plus 16 buff down to a plus 10. I think that would definitely knock cephalopods down a peg. So that's what I would look for as far as a nerf to cephalopods. We did kind of talk about Planet X and Black Hole already, so I'm going to jump to Black Hole. That is one I think should probably get knocked down a peg as well. Where is it? Okay, right here, Supermassive Black Hole. For every non-space card in your deck, give your space cards wherever they are +3 until played. So, as we've seen, most people are just using 4 space cards in their deck, and then you get all these non-space cards that are in your deck. So it's making this quite a huge buff everybody's getting off this card. So I would reduce the +3 down to +2. I think that would make it a little more palatable for playing against. I just think it's a little too good for what we got right now. So just a lot of these space cards in general, I think, are a little too strong. So you might not need to knock as many down. Like if you hit Planet X, you might not need to hit Black Hole. But I think hitting one of them is definitely for sure on the list if I had to guess. Green Witch Meantime. I think for only 3 energy, this card is really strong. You're getting a lot for it. So most people are going to play it. They're going to try to set it up to where you are going to draw it on the second turn of a round. So you are going to get that +48. So for only 3 energy, I think this is a little too strong. I wouldn't do too much to it. I'm thinking just take the base power from 86 and let's just drop it down to 76. So just 10 off of it, I think is fine. It still makes the card, I think, really playable, but just knocks the power level down just a little bit. I think it's a little too strong. So that's what I would do with that card. Next up, I'm going to say Arabian Horse. I think this card's, I don't think it's super like, oh, this card's in every deck, but I don't like what it does, right? You're already winning the round by a good margin, right? So if you're winning the round, like, don't add insult to injury. And to me, this card is just insult to injury. Oh, I'm already up by a decent amount. Let me drop Arabian Horse down now and just close this thing out and just, you have no chance type thing. So I don't like that in general, but just for the power versus the energy cost, you're getting, for 9, you're getting 180 most of the time you play this. I think that's a little steep. So I would look to knock it down to +70, which basically gets you 150 power for only 9 energy, which I think is still very reasonable. So that's what I would look to do there. Next up, another heavy hitting card. We have World Turtle. I think this card has just been seen way too much play. I do like that it kind of forces creativity with the 4-4-4 type decks or whatnot, just really branching out into mixing decks around, which I do like, but I don't like that this card is just running amok right now. And I think it's because you're getting such a good buff off of it. So I would look to drop this from +17, maybe down to like +14. Not a huge nerf, but just something to take it down a little bit. I think it's just a little too good. Next up, I'm going to look at a card I think is really powerful, especially in this meta with all the big cards running around. Almost every deck is got General Sherman in it, so that -30 on the round, really strong. I'd look to do just like I did Bobbit Worm, just knock it down to maybe -25. I think that would be just fine. Next up, I'm going to do another card that's been running rampant, Shinigami. I think this card is also just a little too good. I was thinking about possibly maybe they make it just, by turn 10 is the last time you can use the -500 before it starts hurting yourself. But then it just feels a little awkward because you're holding it too long. So I don't know. I'm thinking we just increase the cost as a nerf, direct nerf just to the cost. So maybe make it 7 or 8 energy to play this card. I think that would be a reasonable nerf to it. I just don't know how else you do a nerf without completely reworking this card in general, just because it's specific to specific rounds. So that's probably what I would do, is just increase cost. The final card I have for the nerf section is going to be another card, I think, for an epic that is just too good right now, if I can spell. And it's going to be the Hierophant, right? Or Hierophant. I don't know how to say that, but you guys can, Ted Mosby me down in the comments later for it, I guess. But when played, if your deck has 3 tarot cards, give them plus 32 permanent power, which is insane, I feel like, right? You're going to get 96 permanent power on 3 of your cards. So if you play this turn 1, I mean, that's a lot of power you're getting for free. So I'm thinking that we just knock this down to plus 25 permanently. I think that still makes the card very playable, very good still, but puts it out of that, like, this card is like a legendary status card. I think right now it should be, as it sits, a legendary card, or it should be nerfed. Let's see. That was my last nerf, so I'm going to switch gears. I'm going to look at some cards that I think could do well with, a little bit extra. So first up, I'm going to look at a few mythic cards. I think Loch Ness Monster is the first on my list. And what I would do is add in just a buff to it. So I'm thinking maybe add in a line that says, not only does it do what it does right there, your opponent's remaining cards in hand lock next turn, we also have an effect that says, and give your mythical creatures, wherever they are, plus 15 until played. So that's going to give us, because it kind of follows the mythical theme with the Loch Ness Monster and the legends and myths, and I feel like mythical creatures needs a little something to it. So buffing this card and giving, another deck an option to play this card, I think would be kind of neat. We might see some doors open up there. Next up, I want to talk about another mythic card. It's going to be Pandora's Box. So this card just reads really bad to me. When drawing a random card in your hand, gains plus 80, and another random card burns for 35 until played. I don't know. I don't like the you're just going to get plus 80 real quick. Okay. So why don't we reduce the plus 80 until played to plus 60 permanently? So you're going to get, instead of just getting the one time, you're just going to get 80 real quick, let's make it mythical status, right? This is a mythic card. Fatalism we just got is giving 2 cards plus 50 permanently. Why would a mythic card be worse than, a legendary card? So that, to me, that's crazy that this card's only given it until played. So let's drop it down to plus 60 permanently, and then only 1 card is receiving the buff. So, like I said, we need to make it worthwhile. Next up, I'm going to do Atlantis. And I have a neat idea for Atlantis. So, obviously, who wrote Atlantis? Plato is the first one who talked about Atlantis and wrote about Atlantis. So I'm thinking follow the philosophy theme with Atlantis, and we're going to add in an effect that says give your philosophy cards maybe plus 10 to plus 15 until played, and there you go. Now it falls into that Plato category of he wrote about Atlantis, and we buff philosophy cards. So I think that makes Atlantis a lot better and playable in philosophy decks, so gives another little boost to something else. We're going to do something similar, but I'm going to target the Arthurian decks. So King Arthur, right now he's kind of boring. He just gives you a little extra energy. I could see maybe reducing this down to plus 3 on the rounds, which obviously that's a nerf, but instead I want to add another effect that says, and then we're going to give plus 30 until played, another buff to Excalibur. Obviously, the lure behind King Arthur and Excalibur goes hand in hand. So why wouldn't this card, buff Excalibur? And the problem is Excalibur is losing 30 power permanently already every time it gets returned. So it's getting hurt. It'd be nice if you played King Arthur and it offset this ding that Excalibur's already receiving. So I think that would make it nice to go hand in hand So anytime you're playing King Arthur, you want to have Excalibur in your deck, or vice versa. There's some way to, put those cards together, I think would be kind of neat. Next card I want to talk about is Easter Bunny. I think this card, right now it's not anything terrible. It's just kind of bland. If you're winning the round, your cards in hand gain +10 this turn, and then return, this card's cheaper. Okay, whatever. But there's egg-themed decks out there. Look, we have Easter egg right here. Why wouldn't this card do something that buffs egg decks, right? So that's what I'd like to see, a whole new, egg deck theme. Because we do have cards that are, for each card in your deck with egg in the name, right? We have Easter egg right here. Why wouldn't Easter Bunny buff eggs? So I'm thinking add a buff. Basically, this card would add a buff with egg in the name, +25 until played, and that's wherever they are. And then basically, to balance it out a little bit, just remove that return effect right there that says this card costs -2 permanently. Who cares about that? Take that out. Let's just get another buff to eggs and make this card playable and make an entire archetype playable. So we could have egg decks running around. I think that would be kind of cool. So that's what I would do with that card. Next up, I want to talk about another card that's an epic that I think could be just a lot better. I want the power per turn deck to be good. And to me, this card screams power per turn, but then once you play it, you're like, oh, this card kind of sucks. Like, you're paying 5 energy, you're only getting 17 base power, and then the effect doesn't always happen. If you don't draw this card in round 1, you basically have a garbage card in your deck the rest of the game. So there's that inherent risk of, oh, if I don't get this card, I just screwed myself and I have this garbage card now the rest of the game. So all it does is, if it's played round 1, you get this nice permanent, power per turn. Okay, that's great. I would love to get +17 power per turn. But what about if I don't draw it? Then this card is just a dead card, basically a garbage card in my hand, right? So what would I do? I would add in a round 2 effect and a round 3 effect, but I would make them cascading power levels. Maybe round 1's +15, round 2, if it's played in round 2, you get +10. If it's played in round 3, you get +5. So then now there's this cascading effect of power level based on when it's played. So after round 3, you're not going to get anything else, but at least you're going to get something out of it. It might not be played on round 1, but if it's not played on round 1, most likely you're going to draw. You're obviously going to draw it round 2, unless you just didn't play 3 cards every turn. But so that's what I would do with that card. I think it would really help power per turn decks out and buff that whole archetype if this card was a little bit better. All right. Next up, I'm thinking we go to a card that's already decent, but I want it to be better. I just don't know why I want this card to be better, but it probably doesn't need a buff, really, but I just feel like for some reason, you don't get it's saying you're going to get +35 permanently, but I feel like you only ever get it the one time. I feel like it's so rare that anytime I never draw this card twice and get the buff twice. So what I would do is push this card back, instead of saying change. After round 3, I would push it to round 2. I think being able to get this one extra time guaranteed would make this card just super good. I don't know. That's what I would like to see with it. Maybe you could do that round 2 and then reduce the power level down a little bit. Maybe make it down to 25 or 30 would be better. And then, if after round 2 you draw it, I think it would be just way better. All right, next up, I want to talk about lock decks. So there's this archetype that you don't ever see anybody play, and it's locking your opponent's cards. And it is so fun when you lock your opponent's cards out and they have only 2 cards they can play and their 3 cards are locked. It's not going to overlock their hand, and it's just super fun. But this card right here, I've tried it so many times in different lock decks, and it's just so expensive. The 9 energy makes it so tough to play, and you're only going to lock them for the next turn, one card. It's just a random card, and then even the effect after that's not that great. Your opponent's cards lose -4 until play. Okay, whatever. I mean, it's decent, but it's not like, wow, this card's fantastic. Like, I feel like for what you're paying 9 energy here. Why isn't it a little better? So I'm thinking we change locks next turn to locks permanently before round 3. So that gives you a chance to lock 2 opponents' slots permanently from this card, which I think would be insane. And then it would make, I just think it would be backbreaking. And I think it would make locking your opponent decks viable, honestly. So I think that could be a really cool buff, is doing something with this card that locks an opponent's card permanently. Kind of like we see with Indigo Milk Cap, but making this, this is the legendary, so it should be the one that's doing the work with the locking your opponent's cards, I think. Okay, next up I want to talk about a cool little card. I think it could be better. It's going to be Hawk's Bill Turtle. Again, another legendary that's just a little underwhelming. Going on that let's hurt your opponent's cards theme, kill their power level, but it's only doing -4. And you have to have lost the turn, so there's inherent gamble there. And you don't want to, I mean, you hate losing the turn because then you're putting yourself behind intentionally. And then you're not, I don't know, it feels bad. It feels tough to do. But if I'm going to lose a turn and potentially lose a round, I want it to really hurt my opponent. I mean, I'm risking, I'm gambling a lot. So why am I only getting so little? So I'd change this from -4 to -7 permanently. That's what I would do with that. I think that would make that card way better, way more viable, way more worth the risk. Next up, going to target another locking card like we did with Blue Dragon. I'm talking Praying Mantis. I don't think it needs a lot, because it's already tough to do with if you're losing the round and sometimes you don't know if you're going to be losing, and then you just draw this card and nothing happens. That is the worst feeling when I draw this card and nothing happens. I hate it. I hate it so much. A lot of times I'll just take this card completely out of the deck. So all I would do is change the draw trigger to a return trigger or a play trigger. I want to make sure it's doing what I want it to do, not having this, oh, I drew it and I didn't want it right now, and now it doesn't do anything. I hate that. I hate that. I hate that. I want to be able to control when I play this card and ensure that I'm going to get the effect. So I would change it to either a play or a return trigger, not a draw trigger. All right. Next up, I want to look at a Life on Land card again. It's going to be... Oop, I misspelled that one. Oop, still misspelled it. Where is it at? Dwarf Hoot? However you say that shit. I don't know. But anyway, this card says, when played, if played between 2 Life on Land cards, your Life on Land cards in hand gain +24 until played. And the part I have a problem with is the in hand part. So it forces you to have a deck full of Life on Land cards, or what are the chances you're going to get, several Life on Land cards in your deck at the same time that are going to buff this card, or that this card are going to buff. So it's kind of awkward. A couple times I played with it, I was very unimpressed with it. So I would change this card from in hand to wherever they are, because I think it would be a lot more impactful. And I mean, you're paying 6 energy. Like, I don't want to not be 100% sure that I'm getting a buff. So for 6 energy cost, I want this to say my cards are going to get buffed wherever they are, and instead of +24, just give me +15. I'll be fine with that. And I think that card would be extremely playable. Next up, I want to talk about the reptiles. I think those could be good. I think they are definitely not played. It's another archetype that's kind of skated over. And this is the card I think that could get it there. It just needs a little more. It says, when played, your reptile cards, wherever they are, gain +15 for 3 turns. So I want to buff that up to like plus 20, plus 25. Let's make these reptiles hit hard. Maybe even extend the number of turns out. Just something to really give reptiles a little something, because I think they do need a buff badly. Oh, where did I back all the way out for? That was my bad. All right, so next up, just got a couple more. Next, I want to look at venomous creatures. I think we could see a buff there. That would be nice to kind of make that archetype more viable. And Eastern Diamondback tries to do it, but it's just not all the way there. It says when returned, if you lost the turn, so now I got a negative effect. I gotta be losing to make this happen. And then wherever they are, gain plus 18 for the round. So they're only going to get, it's only going to be 2 turns really, right? Because you've already played it, and it's a return effect. So what I would do is change to the when played trigger. If you are losing the round, you're going to gain plus 18 for 3 turns instead of this round, because I think that makes it only 2 turns. So I would, again, change to when played trigger. If you are losing the round, gain plus 18 for 3 turns. So I think that would make it more viable, automatically getting the 3 turns instead of only 2, maybe even just 1. So I think that makes a little bit better for venomous creatures. Next up, I want to talk about burn mechanics. I think burn is just really bad right now. I think honestly, I think they just need to rework burn entirely. I think it shouldn't trigger on the after the turn's done. I think if you get hit with the burn right then and there, it should take the power level off your cards immediately. I think that's one of the problems with burn. So this card, if they're going to keep burn the same, what I would say is add an effect to this card that says when played, basically minus 15 power to opponent's cards for the turn. So you're getting, since that's what I want burn cards to do, is hit them immediately, minus power. So instead, just add to this card when played, minus 15 to opponent's cards. I want my burn cards to be similar to these minus effects on my opponent. My debuffing cards like Bobbit Worm that are hitting over and over. That's what I want burn to be, right? And it's so fun when you see your opponent's cards just burning away the longer they don't play them. But a lot of times they just play the cards, and then the burn just doesn't do anything, right? So I just want it to hit immediately. I think that would be the best way to buff it. Next up, I want to talk about Roswell Incident. I think this card could be so cool, but espionage cards are so bad, and there's just not a lot of support. This card's 9 energy costed. Not only do I got to spend the 9 energy, I have to now spend 2 espionage cards to try to get this card viable. And so I have to have 2 espionage cards, and then I have to have space cards in my deck, right? So it's just 2 conflicting archetypes already, and most of the time you have to have like 15 to 20 energy to make this viable, and you're only going to get plus 16 until played. So not only do I think they need to reduce the cost of this card, probably make this a 7 or an 8 costed card. I think that would help a lot. I think you would change this from plus 16 to plus 20. There are other cards doing it just as good. Think of like Cyborg or other Statue of Liberty cards that are buffing just as good, but they don't have all these crazy requirements of you need 2 espionage cards between this and then you're going to need space cards, and it's costing 9 where those are only costing 7 and 4. Like, come on, like, I don't know. And espionage is super bad. Let's go take a look at espionage real quick so I can show you what I'm talking about. Like, there is just like, what's the good cards here? Enigma Machine is playable. What else? Pigeon. I mean, there's just not good cards here, and most of them are expensive, like 6, 6, 5, 7, 7. Got all these 6 costed cards, 7 costed cards. Dead Drops is probably playable, but I mean, either that or you're just going to toss Microdot in there and just be like, okay, I can maybe get my Roswell incident to trigger now. I don't know. I just I feel like the cards in this set are not very good, not very playable. So I would like to see something that makes them playable. Honestly, I think Espionage could be a cool one. We just need some. We need some stuff, man. Give me some stuff. All right. Next up, I want to talk about another card I tried to make a video on a while back, and it just felt really underwhelming. And it's Christ of the Abyss. When played, if your deck has 9 or more Oceans cards, your history cards, wherever they are, gain plus 14, and vice versa. So this deck is limiting you to only 2 albums, history and Oceans, right? So I'm basically limiting my card pool to only 2 albums. Why am I not getting more of a buff? Statue of Liberty limits you to 3 albums to get the full buff on all your cards, and you get plus 21 for it. I have less of a card pool for this card. I'm paying the same energy cost, getting almost the same base power level, but I'm only getting 14 in return with this card. Statue of Liberty gives you like 21 or 22 or something. So why wouldn't we buff this? So I'm thinking with the hindered number of cards, because it's only 2 albums, I think it should be better than Statue of Liberty. I'm thinking change this from plus 14 to plus 24. I think that's what they need to do with that card. Then I think it would open up an avenue in which this card is playable, and we could see more Oceans and history decks running around. All right, next up, I want to talk about just a card I think is completely unplayable. Let's go on a completely different theme here. Fender Stratocaster. What in the heck is this card? This card just seems so bad. So I'm going to lose 35 permanent power just to let my opponent lose 35 until played. What? Why would I want to lose permanent power just to ding them until played? That seems so bad to me. It's not even funny. So either just delete this card out of the game, or let's change it up a little bit. Let's say you only lose 25 permanent power, but your opponent loses 50 permanent power. So let's get them on the same page. If I'm going to lose permanent power, my opponent needs to lose some permanent power, and it better be more. That's the only way this card's even going to see any chance of play. I mean, you've got Dark Web running around that's buffing this thing plus 25, and I still don't want to touch this card. And it's a legendary card, so to me, that's just sad. All right, last card I'm going to talk about today is going to be on the Brilliant Body theme, Brilliant Human Body cards. I think need a little bit of help. I don't think they need much. I think it's playable from what I was testing with it, but I'd like to see Hair get a little buff. I think that'd be kind of neat. This card loses 20 permanently, and your remaining cards in hand gained only 20 for the round. I think your remaining cards need to gain plus 20 permanently. If I'm losing, so best case scenario, I play this card, it loses 20 permanently. Let's say I play it by itself. My 4 cards in hand are getting plus 20 permanently. That's not that insane. I think it makes this card very viable, very playable. Probably borderline really good, but I think that would make this card see a lot of action. So that's what I would look to do, and I think it would help that entire archetype out. But all right, guys, that's the video for you. I am excited of the upcoming meta changes. I think this really needs a shift. I really want to see kind of this stale meta, shaken up a little bit. I'm just sick of the Planet X decks, as you guys know. I'm sick of just basically a lot of the cards I named off in the beginning. Just seeing several Dark Web decks running amok, rampant. Some of these Cephalopod decks, it's all you see. General Sherman, Shinigami, just all those same cards are just smushed into every deck imaginable, and that's what's just boring. I feel like they need to just completely nerf all those cards down. Let's just take them out of the game for the most part, and I think you're going to see new decks arise and new archetypes, new ideas start popping up everywhere as people are scrambling to, what can I come up with now that, this one card isn't just ruining the whole meta. and that's what I'm excited for. I'm really hoping they do something with some of these cards, but who knows? I'm just speculating, and obviously the buffs are just completely out there. There's no way I even probably got close to any of the buffs, but I think a couple of the ones I named were pretty reasonable. I mean, I'm probably not perfect, some of them I probably did overshoot or undershoot, but I think I gave it a good attempt, and I think I showed you guys some cool ideas that I think would be really neat. Stuff like Loch Ness and Atlantis, cards like those I think could really use some cool buffs that could make those cards really playable and mythic status. Right now, I mean, you've got, legendary cards that are on the trade market worth way more than some of these mythic cards. To me, that's like, okay, red flag. Clearly, this card is not, what it should be. And then on the complete other end, you've got cards trading for insane prices. Like Planet X is trading for like 6 mythics or something crazy, or I can't remember how many it is, but I think it was close to 6, if I'm not mistaken. So, like, how do I even make that trade, right? How do I even trade 6 mythic cards for a Planet X? Unless I literally go on Discord and work up a deal with somebody and I'm getting trade banned trying to give them so many good cards. I don't know. I think that's silly. So they just need to knock those kind of cards down a peg, and I think we'll be good. But that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Again, just speculation, what I think and what I wish for. It's on my wish list. So hopefully maybe somebody will see this one day and be like, yeah, that was a good idea. Actually, yeah, let's do that. One can dream, guys. One can dream. But all right, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Like I said, something a little different today, but I figured with the upcoming changes, it might be fun for some of you guys to listen to me, gripe on about certain cards or come up with ideas that I think could be cool for the meta. So I don't know. We'll see. All I know is I'm excited to see what this upcoming change brings. But all right, guys, hopefully you enjoyed. As always, hit that like button, smash that subscribe button down in the bottom right corner, and we will keep bringing you cool content and hopefully some better deck ideas. But all right, guys.